Next, I'm going to talk about some of our nonfiction titles that we have in our graphic novel collection at Albany High. The first title we have is My Friend Dahmer by Derf Backderf. The author went to school alongside Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the most notorious serial killers who tortured and mutilated his victims. The author shares all of the different quirks and oddities about Jeffrey Dahmer and how the lack of adult supervision really contributed to Jeffrey's deterioration mentally. This is not for the faint-hearted and definitely is a conversation starter after kids read it. The next one up is Fun Home, a family tragicomic by Alison Bechtel. Alison Bechtel grew up working in her family's funeral parlor. Her father was very distant. He was a high school English teacher, but also ran the funeral parlor. Allison and her siblings called it the Fun Home. Her father ends up committing suicide, and Allison learns was a closeted gay man. Allison ends up coming out as well, and this book is an homage to her father. Next up, we have two different titles by Don Brown. The first one is The Great American Dust Bowl. One of the nonfiction facts that comes out of this book that I did not know is that much of the Dust Bowl effects were, in fact, man-made. When farmers in the 1930s and 40s stripped different parts of the soil to plant crops, they took out a lot of the protective grasses. And so the Dust Bowl affliction was really, really man-made, and I never knew that. Fascinating topic. The next up title by Don Brown is Drowned City. This is about Hurricane Katrina and New Orleans, and it focuses on the plight of the many people that were left behind when help didn't come and they didn't choose to evacuate. Very fascinating story. Next up, we have Trinity, a graphic history of the first atomic bomb. What I like about this title is that it shares technical scientific concepts and really explains them for not the non-science community, really explains the different concepts in detail and whether, the Manhattan Project should have continued based on the facts in the book. The next up is How to Fake a Moon Landing by Daryl Cunningham. Daryl Cunningham takes different scientific concepts chapter by chapter and debunks them. One of the topics he talks about that was interesting is fracking, the how and why of fracking and what it really is. There's several interesting chapters about different scientific concepts in that title. Next up, we have The Silence of Our Friends. This is a fictionalized story that is set against a true event. It takes place in the late 1960s in Texas, and a Texas college campus had riots over the fact that a civil rights organization was not allowed to have a chapter on campus. That, in fact, did happen, and there was a riot where students and police were injured. There were almost 500 students arrested, and several were charged with the shooting of the police officer. Those facts are true. The story that's set against that real event is fictionalized, but important nonetheless. The next one up is Harry Houdini, The Handcuff King by Jason Luce and Nick Bertozzi. This profiles the successes and problems that Harry Houdini had as a performer, and excellent story. Next up, we have two of my favorites, El Defo by C.C. Bell. El Defo won the Newbery Honor Award recently, and this memoir is just heartwarming. C.C. Bell, when she was about 3.5 years old, contracted scarlet fever, and she lost her hearing. She had been hearing up until that point. Then she got something called the phonic ear, which is almost comedically oversized. She wore it like a backpack and had a big, large set of earbuds or earphones that she wore to be able to allow her to hear. She ends up creating this character, El Defo, as a superhero to help her cope with the fact that she's so very different from her peers and what that looks and sounds like as a young person who used to be hearing. So fantastic story. Next one is Tomboy by Liz Prince. This graphic memoir profiles Liz's experience being a tomboy. She is a girl who is not into pink or ribbons or dresses or makeup, and she just wants to be who she is and be herself. And she's met with a lot of rejection and outright bullying, but she profiles that experience. That was a terrific story. Next up, we have Hidden. This is the story of a young Jewish girl named Ruth who is actually hidden in a Catholic orphanage, and her name is changed to Renee for her safety, which is also based on a true story. Next, we have Guy Jin, American Prisoner of War. This is Matt Faulkner's book, and it's based on a true story where the main character is a 14-year-old half Japanese, half American child who is sent to an internment camp because he looks Japanese and is not protected in any way from being white and Japanese. Next, we have Yummy, The Last Days of a South Side Shorty. This is Robert Sandifer. He was an 11-year-old in 1991 who was shot by members of his own gang. It is a true story. It's about gang life on the south side of Chicago in the early 1990s, and it does have the Coretta Scott King Award on it. That's a fan favorite at Albany High. Next, we have Andre the Giant, Life and Legend by Box Brown. This profiles Andre's success in the World Wrestling Federation and how his success came out of the genetic condition that he had that caused him to be a giant. There's a lot of cameos from different wrestling characters that you probably have heard of, from Hulk Hogan to Mandy Patinkin, etc. Next, we have Safe Area Garage. Don't know how to pronounce that correctly. This is Joe Sacco's visit to Eastern Bosnia in the early 1990s during that civil war in Eastern Bosnia. Next, we have The Other Side of the Wall. This is Simon Schwartz's experience. His parents lived in East Berlin in the 1980s and chose to leave and go to West Berlin. And it's about their experience, even within their own family, rejecting their choice to do so. Interesting look at Berlin in the 1980s. Next, we have the graphic biography of Malcolm X. This one has some dense text. It's definitely for the more advanced reader, but valuable nonetheless. Then we have Strange Fruit by Joel Christian Gill, Uncelebrated Narratives from Black History. This profiles different characters in African American history that have not necessarily been well known. For example, Henry Box Brown mailed himself to freedom with the help of the Underground Railroad and spent 3 days inside a box and mailed himself to freedom. Who knew? Next, this is our Graphic Classics series. We purchase the Graphic Classics titles in most of the books that are being used in our classroom. So if we have an English teacher that's teaching Romeo and Juliet, we try to make sure we have the graphic version of it as well, because a lot of our E&L students will read the graphic novel alongside the original text to try to, construct meaning from what's happening with language that they're not, particularly familiar with. The graphic novels really help. In the same way, we also do have graphic novels from the Stone Arch collection about folktales and fairy tales. These tend to look a little Tim Burton-esque, but they still work. And we talk a lot about some of the different folktales and fairy tales that come from all of the different cultures represented by our E&L students. Very good conversation starter. Mouse. How do I begin? This is the most amazing set of graphic novels that I've ever read. It was probably my introduction to graphic novels as a genre, and it rendered me speechless. Art Spiegelman produced the first book on the left, Mouse, in the 1980s, and it won, I think, the Pulitzer Prize that year. It